always amazed by how God weaves things together that we don't plan ahead. So thank you for preaching my sermon for me. I appreciate that. I'm just going to sit down now. That's not true, but I think we're going to find some repeating themes. The title of this morning's sermon is Going and Staying. Going and Staying. We're in the book of Mark, if you want to start going there. If you don't have a Bible, we have a bunch on the back shelf, and if you need to take it home, take it home. We got plenty. How far is God willing to go to save the lost? Kind of a hypothetical question. I think most of us would have an answer to that, but we're going to look at that a little more carefully today. So far in Mark, the scene has been of Jesus being mobbed by crowds. It's been Jesus flocked to. Once people learned that he could heal the sick and make paralyzed people walk again and things like this, they showed up. A lot of people showed up. And until recently, the scene has been kind of Jesus on the shore, thousands of people, and then, prior to that, he'd be walking wherever he was walking, and the things that were going to happen kind of seemed to be in his way. They seem to be right there. He's coming in from the beach, he's walking by the gates. There's Matthew, the tax collector, right there, taking the import tax. Jesus says, "Follow me." By the way, I've often talked about the will of God, and people ask me, especially young people ask me, how do you know what the will of God is for my life? I want to know. Look, if you're walking as you're supposed to in Christ, the things that are supposed to happen to you, by and large, will simply be in your way. They will be there in the midst of you doing what you're supposed to be doing. They're going to show up. And for the most part, that's what we've seen happen to Christ so far. We've also seen that Jesus doesn't look at the normal qualifications for disciples that the other rabbis were looking for. He's not looking for prior education or the prestige of their family or their moral behavior. We've already figured that out. That's not new. Jesus has already demonstrated that. After all, Jesus did call Matthew the Roman tax collector. And it was game on. By Matthew 2:15, we see that the sinners, the people who were clearly did not measure up, they were eating with Jesus. They were flocked around him. That Jesus was comfortable with them. That he even proclaimed that these were the people he came to be with. Jesus has proven repeatedly that he has authority over demons. Even absolute authority over demons. That's not new to the passage of Mark. So as we look at today's episode, scene, whatever you want to call it, there are some things that we're going to see that we've already seen before. We're going to find an outcast. That's not new. We're going to have Jesus' power over demons. That's not new. We're going to see victory and deliverance. That's not new. So here's your challenge as we go through the sermon this morning. Try to notice what is new and different. Because this scene, this episode, this event is supposed to add to our understanding of Christ and what he's doing. So he's already covered those topics to some extent. What we're supposed to get out of this one is the stuff that's added. It's the new stuff. So let's see if we can pay attention and see what that is as we go. So let's read the passage first of all. We're in Mark chapter 5, and we'll read verses 1 through 20. It's a fairly long passage today. I'm reading out the New International Version, and it's up on the screen. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and he fell on his knees in front of him. And And he shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake where they were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, and said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how much he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. This is a pretty weird story, to be honest. I mean, many of us have heard this story. I've heard this story many times, but it's not normal. I mean, lots of stuff that Jesus does isn't normal, but this is really weird. In some ways, our story really starts, if you go back maybe a page or two, to 435, Mark 435. And we don't want to try to paint the picture of the scene. I often like to do that because it gives us a better feel. Mark 4:35, that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." This whole story that started last week of going across the lake, what we call the Sea of Galilee, it starts in the evening. So this storm we talked about last week was at dusk, or maybe even in the evening. It's getting dark. So it isn't just a scary storm, it's a scary storm in the dark, which isn't a lot of fun. It's only a lake. This is not an ocean. It's a lake. It doesn't take them days to go to the other end of the lake. They get there, it's nighttime. It's dark. If you put up the map, maybe. There we go. I know it's small. The yellow bit, if you can see the yellow blob, that's Galilee. We've been talking about that. Judea, so you got Judea, that somehow for some reason they put all of Judea and Samaria together. That's silly. But Judea is the bottom half of the green blob. Then if you can see a little blue blob next to Galilee, that's the Sea of Galilee, or the lake. It's a lake. So they started on the north end and they boated to the south end. So they're not in what we would call Jewish territory anymore. And that's where they went. So Jesus says to the crew, "Let's go to the other side of the lake." Why? Why would Jesus say, "Go to the other side of the lake"? We can come up with all kinds of reasons, right? Jesus was tired of the crowds, so he wanted to escape, and this was the easiest way. Of course, if he was going to do that, why would he go to the far other end of the lake? Why wouldn't he just go over a little ways, right? Why go to the other side of the lake if he was just trying to get rid of the crowds? I don't know, except this. If Jesus did something, it was God's will. The answer to why did Jesus cross the road was not to get to the other side. As always, it was God's will. The punchline for Jesus doing anything is it was God's will. So anytime Jesus does anything, whatever other excuse or reason or whatever we can come up with, here's the bottom line we can always come back to every single time: it was God's will. It was God's will that Jesus get into a boat and go to the other side of the lake in the middle of the night and have a horrible storm. And now everyone's crawling out of the boat. How well do you dry after being completely soaked in the middle of the night? Not so good. They're sopping. They're wet. They're tired. They fought for their lives. They're getting off this boat. They've probably got a few things that are really on their list of things to do. Get dry, maybe eat something, and get some rest and go to sleep. We just died. We just kept ourselves from dying out there. And then Jesus, of course, made the storm go away. And we're not sure which freaked us out more. The weird storm or Jesus saying stop and it just disappeared. We're still digesting that. They've landed in the Gerasenes. That translates the land of the refugees. The people that lived in this area presumably were a mixed bag. There were some Jewish people there. There were Gentile people there. If you don't know what Gentile people is, that's everybody who isn't Jewish. It's kind of mixed up. It isn't really Jewish territory, kind of the way that Galilee and Judea were. But there were Jewish people who lived there. There's a group of towns nearby, but it's not really close to where they landed. The Decapolis was a group of little towns that kind of grew and merged into one. That's why it was called the Decapolis. It stands for 10 towns or 10 cities. It kind of mushed into one. So here they are. And they're immediately confronted with a man from the tombs. So what's likely nearby? Tombs. A graveyard. Middle of the night, sopping wet, graveyard. Freaky weird guy runs out of the graveyard at your little group. This is what's going on. Can it get any worse? Well, sure. So this is a guy who's been bound with chains and has broke them. Are there still chains dangling from him that he broke from earlier? We know he's going to be covered with gross, weird scars. He's cut himself habitually for a long time with rocks. And then they healed. For all we know, he's currently bleeding. He's something out of a horror movie. That's what's happening. And he runs to Jesus from a long way off. I don't know how far that is. It means there's plenty of time to worry about what this maniac is going to do when he gets there. And he's crazy. He's not a little crazy. He's bug nuts crazy. He is out of his mind. He's whacked. He's out there. He's gone. He's nuts. Dangerously crazy. Mucho crazy. Not one demon, that would be enough. No, they call themselves Legion. The Legion was between 3,000 and 6,000 Roman soldiers. I don't know whether that's literal or not. I mean, after all, it's a demon that named themselves, and demons have been known to lie, so maybe he was exaggerating. I don't know. Doesn't matter if it's literal, it was a lot. There were a lot of demons in this man. Oh, by the way, I'd like to introduce you to Jesus' newest disciple. This guy. See, really, that's the punchline of where this all goes. The punchline is, this guy is who Jesus came across the lake to save. Well, what would I do? What would I be inclined to do if I met an axe murderer? Me personally, I'm guessing run. Run would probably be right at the top of the list. Barring run, it would be shoot him in the face or something. Use a shovel or some sort of self-defense measure. Attack the man. I mean, those really are your two choices. Some of you would go straight for the attack because that's how you're wired. None of us would go straight for the get the heck out of there. What would Jesus do if he met an axe murderer? Cast out his demons, forgive his sins, and transform his life? We don't get God very well. In America right now, there's a guy named Kanye West. He's a musician. He has written some really bad music in the past, and he's been involved with some really bad people in the past. And right now, he has confessed that he's become a Christian. And there's a whole media thing about whether he did or did not become a Christian. Okay, look, I'm not God, and I can't look into a man's heart. But here's the thing. Don't doubt for a moment whether or not God can save him. Don't doubt that. Don't doubt that. Kanye West is a piece of cake compared to this nightmare. God can save whoever he chooses to save.
Amen.
What about you? Do you have pretty big doubts about whether God can really save you? Or maybe it's someone else in your life that you have lost faith about because of their problems, because their problems are too big, or because of their attitude, it's just too bad, or because of their addictions, they're just too deep. Who is it in your life that you've written off? Are they really worse off than this guy? God can handle drug addiction, and alcohol addiction, and legal problems, even demonic activity. Been involved with the occult? God can handle it. Witchcraft? God's got it. God can handle it. There isn't an it he can't handle. It doesn't exist. I wonder sometimes how quickly we as Christians forget that we are called to that third option. We see evil in the world and we want to run from it or we want to fight it, but God calls us to redeem it and rescue it. Because God sees that evil in all of us. If his inclination wasn't to save it, we wouldn't be saved. Every person that you have badmouthed, complained about, or even been terrified of, God wants to forgive, restore, and transform. That can be hard to digest. Now, the way this plays out, though, that gets very interesting. Because there's some weird details to this. Verse 10, we find out that he doesn't want to be sent out of the area, or some versions would say sent out of the country. This is a strange request to me. Perhaps this area or this country was their assignment. I don't know. That's interesting. What's even stranger to me is that Jesus goes along with it. There are things that happen in the scripture that I can't explain well. I've come across it when I study for my sermons. I look at lots of different opinions. There's some people who feel that they can explain this pretty well. I'm not convinced. So I'm not going to tell you things that I don't feel confident of. So for me personally, I don't know why Jesus decided to allow this to happen. But then is what happened. So if we put up the map again. All right, so if you can see the blob, I don't know if you can see the blue blob up on the north. That's where the lake is. So there's a mountain range that runs to the right of that. Pretty much all the way down. There's mountains or hills. And so what would happen first, you have the hill country first and then the mountains. But that started right after the beach. So you've got the lake, and then the beach, and then the hills kind of started right away. They still do, and then it goes up. So that's what it looks like. And on these hills is a massive herd of hogs. Now, when you think of a pig, I don't know what you think of. I don't know how many of you have seen a pig in person. If you have seen a pig in person, it probably surprised you. Because the first time I saw a pig in person, I was like, oh, that's about 3 times the size I expected. It was big. The big thing. And the word very much is hogs. These are hogs, we would say in America. Hogs. Big herd of hogs, 2,000 hogs. Now, some people are convinced that it was Jewish folks that owned these pigs. I don't know that for sure. This was a mixed community. ethnically, there were both Jews and Gentiles. It didn't have to be Jews that owned the pigs. Some people think that it is. But if it was Jews that owned the pigs, here's an interesting fact for you. According to the Torah, it was illegal for a Jew to eat pig. We all know that. That's actually pretty common knowledge. Most people know that Jewish people can't eat pigs. What you may not know is that it was perfectly legal to own one. It was also legal to sell it for a profit. So if it was a Jewish person who had decided they were going to make money off of the Roman army by raising pigs and selling meat to the Romans, that actually wasn't against the Torah. That was nothing illegal or immoral or against the Torah to do that. So it could have been a Jewish person that owned 2,000 pigs, and that in and of itself wasn't sinful. So they didn't eat it. So the fact that there were pigs here doesn't necessarily mean anything spiritually. This happens to be what was there. So, if I was an enterprising Jew who wanted to raise pigs and sell the meat to the Roman army, this would probably be a good place to do it. It's near enough to Galilee and Judea, so I'm kind of near the big Jewish population, but far enough away that all my neighbors aren't calling me an idiot because I'm growing pigs and hating me. Making a nice compromise there. Either way, 2,000 pigs died. 2,000 pigs in any day and age is a fortune. Right? 2,000 pigs today would be a massive loss. 2,000 pigs then was a massive loss. Someone lost a massive amount of money. Huge. Someone lost their fortune. Okay, and just because I like to paint the scene. Imagine now, you're in the dark, it's night, you're exhausted, you're wet, the weird guy comes out of the graveyard that's over there, Jesus is talking to him, and the next thing you hear is the thunder of 2,000 pigs rumbling down the mountain, and their screams as they trample over each other and twist and fall and all that other stuff leaking out of the darkness. This is about the creepiest scene in the entire Bible. And then the eerie silence as they all drown. What do you think the water was like the next day as they went to leave? This isn't an ocean, there's no tide. They just sit there and float. That's it. So, the herdsmen, desperate to prove that it wasn't their fault, the 2,000 pigs just committed suicide, going to the town and tell their story. And then everybody comes out to see what the heck is going on. And this would have taken a while. The town wasn't nearby. This was a walk. This would have taken some time, then they would have to tell people, then they have to get organized. I have a very hard time believing that they get back to the scene before morning. I don't have to guarantee this, I'm just trying to make good estimates about time and how things work. I think it was probably light by the time this whole thing, next episode, went down. So morning comes and everybody from the town comes to the beach, and then the disciples are around the fire with the freaky weird guy, but he looks a little less freaky weird now because it's day and he's acting normal. Everything's pretty good except for the 2,000 floating carcasses in the lake. So I've got two more things to point out, and then we're going to try to zoom out to the big picture. The first thing I want to look at is the reaction of the crowd to the demon-possessed man sitting calmly with the disciples in verse 15. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. This really goes right back to what we were talking about during communion. Fear. Does that seem right? Fear. I mean, why not relief or compassion for this poor man who had been hurt and been a mess? Or how about excitement? Or how about joy? Or how about glorifying God? Or how about wonder? Or how about any kind of other emotion other than being terrified? What about what Jesus did should have been scary to anyone? The scary stuff all happened last night. Is it scary now? Why fear? Because the wisdom of God is foolishness to the perishing, what we just talked about. Because the people were more comfortable with their normal, no matter how disturbed or deranged it might be, than they were with God's power to fix it and change it. And this has not changed in our current community and culture. No matter how twisted or disturbed or weird our culture gets, we try to embrace it. And then be accepting. And incorporate. It's more than just live with it. The world doesn't want God's deliverance. They want their own normal. And the idea that there is a God that can reach in to a person's life and change who they are terrifies them. They don't want anything to do with it. These people want Jesus out of their lives and out of their community because he's messing things up. And how can, it's so bizarre to me that healing this man who desperately needed healing. And you know, they see him changed, and they see those dead pigs, and they're like, you're too much. The cost of you being around is too high. So this reaction is bizarre and yet indicative of the world. The second thing I want to point out before we zoom out to the big picture is that this new disciple wants to go with Jesus, but Jesus says no. In verse 18 through 20, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. I'm going to explain that. But first, I want you to try to recall the challenge I made to you a little earlier about noticing the differences. Have you noticed any? Maybe you have noticed several. I'm going to focus on two of them. Difference number one, the amount of effort that Jesus makes to get to this person and save them. What kind of events have we had so far? I already talked a little bit about this idea. You know, Peter healed Peter's mom. He was in the house he was in. Then after he heals the mom, does Jesus go anywhere? No, the moms come to the house. The leper approaches Jesus on the road. The paralyzed man's friend dig a hole in the ceiling to get to him. Jesus is just doing a seminar. Time and time again, the encounters of Jesus have simply happened in his path. And like we've talked about before, this is different. Jesus stops and loads up the boat and faces a freak storm and lands on this deserted beach to meet this guy. But the deal is that in order to save him, Jesus is perfectly willing to send 2,000 hogs into a lake to die. This man's salvation, let's look at what surrounds this man being saved from his demons. Inconvenience, because going across an entire lake and facing the whole bit wasn't exactly part of the regular, it's inconvenient. It's out of the way. 2, danger. The storm would have killed them were it not for the intervention of God. 3, death. The death of 2,000 animals in sacrifice for this man's life. That's the trade-off. Save this man, 2,000 animals die. inconvenience, danger, and death. But really, what is one lake compared to how far Jesus had already traveled to seek and save the lost? Jesus left the comforts and glory of heaven to save you. And to that end, he lived an entire life in the storms of this world. He had no right or reason to have to face danger. He didn't need to face discomfort. He didn't have to deal with blisters on his feet and getting tired at night and getting hungry. He didn't deserve any of that. Inconvenience and danger is something Jesus accepted with the task, go to the earth and save my people. But of course, when it came to us, it wasn't the pigs who died, it was him. He sacrificed himself. So what was in you could be put in him even to death. Do you see the picture? Sin does to us everything that the demons were doing to that man. That man was living in the tombs. According to Ephesians 2:1, we were dead in our trespasses and sins. Sin keeps us in the tomb. We are the living dead. He was, as much as he was a living zombie living in the midst of the tomb, so were we in the midst of our sin. What did the sin empower him to do? It seemed that it kept him free from the shackles, right? Sin seemed to empower him and make him strong so that nothing could bind him. He felt free. Free to do what? Just hurt himself and destroy others. You see, what those demons were doing to that man were a perfect illustration of what sin does to us. And do you think that 3,000 demons isn't maybe an accurate representative of amount of sin that had to come out of us and be put on our Savior? How many sins of mine that kept me dead, that kept me feeling empowered and free only to destroy myself and others? How many sins had to be pulled out of me and put in him? Even to death. Jesus did all of this for a man of undiscernible heritage. He's just a man. We don't know what tribe, and it doesn't matter. And I'm so glad it doesn't say. It's just a man. Beset by demons, who Jesus goes completely out of his way to save. And Jesus is still coming for people to deliver them from the thousands of sins that plague and destroy their lives. He hasn't quit doing that. And the irony is that when people are delivered from their sins, their family and their friends are still terrified by the power of God instead of joyful to see their friend and family member come to Christ. It hasn't changed. God reaches in and saves people from their sin. Instead of the people around them going, hallelujah, they go, oh, that happened to you. It hasn't changed any. This man is far more representative of us than I think we would want to admit. And what Jesus did for him is far more representative of what he did for us than I think we'd want to admit. The other difference I want to point out, and I hinted at this already, was the instructions to the new disciple. Every other time so far, it has been some combination of follow me and tell nobody. He went to the disciples, follow me, drop what you're doing, end your life, quit being a fisherman, you're done. Matthew, you're not a tax collector more, you're with me. All 12 of the disciples, you had a life, you're done, come on, we're going. But then, the leper that came to him on the road, what did Jesus say? Tell nobody. So now, there's this guy, and he says everything opposite. Stay where you are, tell everybody. What in the world is going on? We've got to understand that God commands some to go, and he commands others to stay. And staying, in this case, would not have been the easier path at all. Let's work this out. Let's start with whoever it was that lost 2,000 pigs. Okay, if you had 2,000 pigs to lose, are you broke? No. You are a rich, powerful member of the community who has a lot of prestige and a lot of clout. And that person is looking for someone to blame. Jesus left. That would have been a convenient person to blame, but he's gone. Who's next? You, the scarred up guy. Your fault. He gets to stay and live with that. Think it's going to be easy? I don't think so, because he's looking for a scapegoat. That's not going to be fun. Not to mention, like what I just said, the scars on this man's body from the constant self-abuse aren't going away. He's never going to get to hide. He's never going to be normal. He's never going to be average. Ever. He has been called to proclaim Christ to the very same people who were scared to death of him and begged him to leave. That's who he's supposed to witness to. Following God isn't the same for everyone. Some who think they would rather stay are called to go. That would have been me. You know what my plans were when I was 17? See, I was going to get a specific kind of degree that let me help other pastors. I was going to help counseling. And I was going to live in the same spot for my entire life. It was going to be great. It was going to be good money. And live in and it was going to be awesome. That was not God's plan for me. I would have liked to have stayed. I was called to go. I'm glad I did. Others who think they would rather go are called to stay. How easy or comfortable for us isn't really part of the equation. That's not the deal. That's not what he's looking for. He's not looking for how easy it is for you. He has a plan, and he wants you to follow it. Doesn't God want me to be happy? Oh, God wants you to be joyful? In what? James 1:2 says, in our trials. Woo! Joy has far more in common with victory than it does with comfort. I'm going to say that again. Joy has far more to do with victory than it does with comfort. And victory comes from struggle and trial and conflict and being in the mud of it and getting punched a few times maybe. That's okay. Because in victory there is joy. And victory comes from obedience. I wouldn't be surprised if there's people in this room, as small as it is, that God would send overseas if you would listen. But that idea may scare you to death. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are others whom God is calling to stay in Exmouth and to minister, to make a difference, and it scares you to death. See, this event here shows a whole new aspect of what discipleship can mean. Jesus pursues and saves the incredibly unlikely and inconvenient at great cost. And afterwards, he asks them to do the hardest thing of all, and that is stay in this community and be a witness for him. What he asks isn't easy. See, I don't know by standing up here who you might be in the story. Maybe you're like one of the 12 disciples. And you're learning, and you're preparing, and you're seeing God work. But the truth is, someday it's going to be your turn. Someday you're going to have to accept the challenge and go. Go as God wills. Maybe that's going across the street, but go as God wills. Don't delay long. Maybe you're like the man plagued by the demons. Your troubles seem huge. Your mistakes seem to control you. You know you have no hope to ever end the evil that is destroying your life. Please, would you fall at his feet and proclaim him the Son of the Most High God? Though your mistakes are so many, Jesus will bear them all. They will move from you to him. And yes, this did result in his death, but he isn't dead anymore. He's alive. He is the risen, reigning, eternal King. And the most amazing thing that you could do is in that sense of chaos and destruction and trappedness in your life to reach out in faith to the only one who could possibly deliver you from that. Perhaps if you were honest, you would be the townsperson who just wants Jesus to leave. You see Jesus as a threat to living the life you want, the world as you see it, the normal you wish. If so, then as Jesus commanded the man who was delivered from demons, I proclaim to you today, verse 19, this is me speaking, verse 19. I proclaim to you how much the Lord has done for me and how he has had mercy on me. Let my life, if that can be any testament at all to the changing power of Jesus Christ, if you are sick of God messing with your life, let me tell you, there is nothing you need more than God messing with your life. You desperately need God to mess with your life and fix it and change it and get it in the direction it needs to go. Lastly, perhaps you're being called to stay. Though it is hard to stay. Maybe it's embarrassing, stay. Maybe people will attack you, stay. It might be easier to leave, stay. Stay and proclaim the great things that God has done for you and his amazing mercy in your life. Stay in that marriage. Stay in that friendship. Stay in that situation. Stay in this town if that's what God is calling you to do. Just because it's hard doesn't mean God isn't asking you to stay. Sometimes being a disciple means to go. Sometimes being a disciple means to stay. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I see myself in this man who you set free from the demons. Though my sins were in the thousands, and though they kept me dead, and though they only empowered me to hurt myself and others, you freed me from those. You took them on yourself, though it caused your death. Or if there is any person in this room that needs to experience that moment, would you give them the courage during this song to come up and just talk with me? I'd be so excited to share with them. Lord, there are people in this room that are being called to act. Maybe they're being called to go. Maybe they're being called to stay. But in no case do we expect it to be easy. That's not the deal. That's not what you promise. You're not promising easy. You're saying, do my will, I will be with you. And I will bring you joy in the victory. I will be with you. I look at the story and I look at this man and I think and I try to feel how hard was it for him to watch that boat float off in the lake. To have been set free and then watch them leave. And I had to stay back. But I can only imagine that you must have empowered him. Because you never ask us to do anything that you don't also give us the strength to do. I wonder what his life was like. I wonder how you empowered him to do what Jesus asked him to do. Lord, I have no doubt that you did. Lord, would you empower us? Would you open our eyes? Would you cause us to have compassion for those who might scare us? Compassion for those who we think are too wicked to fix, too broken? Would you help us to remember that nobody we know is scarier than this dude was, and you fixed him? Would you rekindle our hope in your capacity to change the alcoholic, the drug addict, the deranged, the sick, the hurting, the wrong, so that we would pursue that third option: redemption, forgiveness, transformation. For the difficult people in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.